every single human on Earth wakes up between 1 and 3 in the morning when your core body temperature, because it automatically puts you into a lighter stage of sleep and oftentimes an awakening. Here's the difference.
My name is Robert Love. I'm a neuroscientist. I specialize in helping people prevent Alzheimer's disease with science. And I have a medical clinic where we are reversing Alzheimer's in our patients. And my medical director is Dr. Josh Hellman, and we are located in Florida. In this episode of the Brain Fit podcast, I interview Dr. Michael Breus, the sleep doctor. He's one of the world's leading experts on sleep. In this episode, you're going to learn how to improve your sleep, why sleep is so important for your brain. It's exceptionally important. Foods you can eat that are great for sleep, foods to avoid, and also supplements you can take that are great for sleep. Bonus, you're even going to learn about Dr. Breus's favorite mattress. So that's really important. So watch this episode, take lots of notes. And Dr. Breus is just a wonderful person. I'm honored to call him a friend. Here is the podcast with Dr. Michael Breus.
Welcome to the Brain Fit podcast, where we share the cutting-edge science on how you can improve your memory and live a happier, healthier life.
I am so excited. Today is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome the sleep doctor, Dr. Michael Breus, international best-selling author. I've been following his work for years. I've recently become friends with him, friends with you, Michael. And so I thank you so much for joining us, the one and only Dr. Michael Breus. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Love. I appreciate it. I've been following your work for a while, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to work together. And I think it's really cool because your audience, which has been learning more about brain health and what happens as we age and all of those things, sleep turns out to be one of those fundamental aspects that I think they will have an interest in. I know you agree with me on that point. And so I think I'm excited to have this conversation because I'm curious to see where it's going to go. I think all the listeners are going to have some fun.
So much fun stuff. At your talk at Eudaimonia, where we got to meet in person, I have pages and pages of notes. I tried to video record it to say I came to do some short content, but it was all so good. I ended up recording almost the whole thing. I said, well, this isn't short form content. I got the whole lecture here. So for those of you who want shortcuts, I want you to know that if you're having trouble sleeping, right, Dr. Breus's previous book, The Power of When, it's an international bestseller. It'll help tell you when you want to sleep. I recently found that on my parents' bookshelf, which I was so delighted to see that I had it. I used to figure out when I sleep. Can we start there, Dr. Breus? So people don't know when to fall asleep, especially with, I have a bright light in front of me. It's 6 p.m. now. It's kind of dark outside. People are staying up playing video games, watching television on their iPads.
Yep.
It's hard to understand when we should go to sleep because the natural light is no longer the same influence in our lives that it used to be. And you've come up with, through the research, you've come up with something really, really helpful that's helped people identify who they are, what their genotype is, and when they need to fall asleep. Can you walk people through that?
Sure. So what I'd like to do is tell you the story of the patient that I had that kind of spawned this whole idea for me about 15 years ago. So I had a patient come in, an insomnia patient. And to be honest with you, Rob, I failed. I mean, when I say I failed, I failed. I'd been working with her for 3 months. We tried cognitive behavioral therapy. Worked with her physician. We tried sleeping pills. We tried combinations. We tried supplementation. Nothing was working. And so when I have those kind of cases, I bring them in free of charge and I just interview them for about an hour and a half because clearly I've missed some integral component here or some detail that I really need to get my hands on. And about, 45 minutes into the conversation, she turned to me. This is when I was practicing on the East Coast when I lived in Georgia. She said, Dr. Breus, if I just lived in California, everything would be fine. And I was like, excuse me? What do you mean by that? And she said, well, California, they go to work 3 hours later than us. And if I could just sleep in, like if I didn't have to wake up at 6:30 and I could sleep in till 9:30 and I could work not at, till 5, but let's say till 7, she was like, my world would be fantastic. And I turned to her and I was like, why don't you do that? And she said, well, got to be honest with you. I'm on waivers. She called them waivers at work, which meant she was about to be fired. She'd been falling asleep at her desk. Her work product had been awful. She'd fallen asleep at meetings. It was a real issue. And so I said, well, would your boss let you come in late and leave late? And she's like, honestly, Dr. Breus, like, I'm pretty sure I'm getting fired. This was like on a Friday. So I said, hey, can I call him on Monday and see what's going on? She said, sure. So I called him up. I told him who I was, what I wanted to do. And he said, look, here's the problem. She's a mess. He said, I don't care what happens, but in 2 hours, you can let her come in 2 hours later and leave 2 hours later. But on Friday, she's fired. I was like, oh my God, great. No pressure. Right. And so I did my thing with her. I had her sleep in, talk with her husband, talk with her family, had her sleep in by 2 hours. So she wasn't waking up at 6:30. She's waking up at 8:30. I had her stay at work. She stopped work, not at 5:30, but at 7:30. And then when she got home, we kind of cleared it with the family. And I call her boss on Friday, and the very first words out of his mouth were, I have 3 more employees I want you to talk to, which was interesting. Hey. Right. So I was like, okay, I must be onto something here. And so I really started to think about this idea called chronotypes. Now, I want to be super duper clear. I did not discover chronotypes. Chronotypes have been around, identified at least since the early 70s, when somebody came up with a morningness, eveningness questionnaire that's been around forever and ever. And to be clear, you all have heard about this idea of chronotypes. You might not have heard of the term, but you've definitely heard of some of the vocabulary that comes with it. If anybody out there has ever been called an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. So
that word chronotype, that's from, I don't know the Latin word. It's from chronos, which I guess means time. Is that right?
Yep. And the type of timing. So it's timing type. Like, what is your timing type? I believe that's kind of where it all comes from. And what's interesting about these chronotypes is they're genetic. So you don't get to choose, right? So a lot of people came to me like, I'm an early bird. I know it. It's like, well, actually, I just looked at your 23andMe data or your ancestry.com data. I can show you where you're not an early bird.
Really? There's a specific gene or set of genes that
absolutely there is. So if you look on the human genome, so number one, to be clear, there are 74 different markers throughout the human genome that will affect your circadian rhythms. That's what we're talking about here is circadian rhythms.
74 markers that affect your circadian rhythm. Wow.
But there's one main grouping, and that's called the PER3 area. And so what we know is when certain DNA building blocks in this PER3 area are flip-flopped in the opposite direction, you're a night owl. When they're flipped in a different direction, you're an early bird. This is genetics, okay? You don't get to change it. You're born with it, okay? So what's cool about this is once you identify that area as an adult, it actually tells you what your built-in sleep schedule is. So this is where it got really exciting. And so I created a quiz. So if people go to chronoquiz.com, you can take a quiz. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes. And at the end of it,
and I know we're gonna click out and do this right now. Can you spell that again?
chronoquiz.com, chronoquiz.com.
We'll put them in this.
This episode is brought to you by the new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe by Dr. Michael Breus, The Sleep Doctor. This is a fantastic book that shares you some really important things you can do to improve your sleep, which is perhaps one of the most important things you can do to improve your memory. This is available wherever books are sold. I recommend pick up your copy on Amazon. Your brain will thank you.
And so what's cool about it is you can take the quiz 3 or 4 minutes later, you will end up in one of 4 categories. Now, people might be saying, wait a second, I've heard of early birds. I've heard of night owls. He's got 2 more categories. What's this guy talking about? So what I'm talking about is, believe it or not, there actually has always been a 3rd category. There've been early birds, there've been night owls, and then there are people in the middle. And for some reason, researchers called them hummingbirds. I don't know why. It seems really stupid. I can't come up with a good reason for it. But just to be clear, those were the 3 birds. Now, here's the problem.
Oh, birds. Right. 3 birds. Okay,
right.
Gotcha.
So here's the problem. The patient that I was telling you about, she didn't fit into any of those categories. She actually had an irregular sleep schedule where sometimes she was a night owl, sometimes she was an early bird. It was a mess, right? But we figured it out by moving her schedule around during that 1 week. And now we were able to start adapting and doing some different things. So what I discovered was a 4th chronotype. Okay. So the 4th chronotype actually is one that's related to anxiety. So I called them. So by the way, I changed the names. So you'll love this.
I like them. They're cool. They're mammals.
Right. Well, and that's what I did was because I'm not a bird, I'm a mammal. Right. And so I said to myself, like, come on, I want to identify with this animal. Now you'll appreciate this. I wanted to choose an animal that actually represented the circadian cycle, right, of that particular category. Here's the problem. You want to choose an animal that's very inspiring. Okay. It turns out nobody wants to be a porcupine. You know, nobody wants to be a platypus, right? Right. A raccoon, a baboon. No, nobody wants to be any one of those. So I had to find animals that fit the chronotypical profile and were inspirational. So early birds turn into lions, right? Because who wouldn't want to be the king or queen of the jungle every single day?
Absolutely.
Right. And remember,
Absolutely.
lions are the ones who usually go and they forage early. They usually hunt before dawn. So they really do follow this category. The middle,
the lions are the ones that are doing the hunting. The male lions are really, really lazy. The women lions are doing all the work. The men kind of lay around.
You're noticing a few characteristics that are also true in humans. So the people in the middle, right? Instead of hummingbirds, I call them bears. So they basically run off of what's called a solar cycle. I'm going to explain the biology behind all of this in just a second. The night people are wolves, right? We know wolves are night creatures. They hunt in packs at night, right? So I want to be super duper clear. So far, I haven't told anybody anything that they didn't already know, right? Early birds, night owls, people in the middle. And to be factual, when you go all the way back to like caveman, cavewoman days, right? And you start to look at all of that, guess what? Who were the lions? Well, they were the hunters, right? Because they could get up early, go to their kill, whatever. Who were the bears? Well, those are the people that tended the village and they built the buildings and they kind of did all that stuff because bears love a 9-to-5 schedule. Who were the guards at night? Well, those were the wolves. They were up anyway. Give them a spear, have them stand around, right? Like, might as well do something with yourself. So again, nothing new until we get to this new category called dolphins. So the reason I chose dolphins is because dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake looking for predators because, they're swimming the whole time. And I felt like that represented my insomniacs who have a lot of anxiety. And that's really what this category came down to, is people with this genetic makeup have a tremendous amount of anxiety, specifically when it comes to sleep. So once I was able to identify the 4 categories, then we started to have some fun. And to be honest with you, Robert, when I first did this, I thought I was just going to be like getting people their sleep schedule because I'm a sleep doctor, right? I was like, okay, if it's genetic, we can figure it out. Let's do this. I discovered literally over 250 studies that were done on chronotypes that had nothing to do with sleep. Things like, what's the best time of day for a night owl to exercise? Never thought about that, right? What's the best time of day for a lion to eat a high-fat, high-caloric meal, right? Never thought about that. And so all of a sudden I start getting all this research and I'm like, holy shit, this is like the absolute unlock. This is like the cheat code of all cheat codes. It's unbelievable.
Pardon my interruption, but one of my favorite parts of your book, I was reading this when I was home at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, was when's the best time to have sex? I thought,
one chapter.
This is really helpful. Maybe I should dog ear this and just leave this out for my parents' troop. That was so brilliant. And you made it very, very clear. You said, listen, you want to have sex when your sex drive is high, which for most of us, generally speaking, is in the morning when our testosterone is high. Oh, boy, that's really smart. And most of us do it out of convenience when we're both in bed and we might have fewer clothes on, which is at night, and you said sex is way too important. Lovemaking is way too important to just leave it to convenience. This is an important part of being human, not to mention the necessary act to continue the species. Plus, it's one of the most wonderful things people can express between loved ones. You might want to put this at a good time slot,
exactly.
Right? If we put work at a good time slot, why not lovemaking? I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
And that turned out to be the most popular chapter in the book. Surprise, surprise. But we even had chapters on, so this one was really interesting. So just to take a little piece for a second, there's a chapter on there on when to talk to your children. Okay. And so I had this experience with my daughter. So my daughter, when I was writing this book, I think she was like 16, 17 years old. So high school, right? And I was in charge of mornings and waking the kids up. Which is never a good idea in high school, okay? Nobody ever wants to wake up in high school. And I would walk in her room in the morning and I'd say, Carson, rise and shine. What have you got on the plate today? And she would be like, Dad, leave me alone, right? Like that was grunts, like barely audible were coming out of her, right? If I went into her room at 2:00 in the afternoon, when I knew her chronotype, because she was a night owl, would have her be alert and aware, I walk into her room and I say, Carson, what do you have on your plate? And I have an hour-and-a-half long conversation with my daughter.
Amazing.
There's nothing more important than an hour-and-a-half long conversation with my daughter. That's what's so cool about this is you figure out people's timing and then you know when they're available to you, right? Then you know when they're going to be receptive to things, whatever it happens to be. It can be emotional stuff, like how is your relationship, or it can be biology. When do you want to have sex? Like, what's cool about this thing is it's actually tracking what your internal hormonal cycle looks like and be able to put you in a category. So that way it starts to make a little bit of sense. And so that was the power of when. And it turned out to be a great book, 17 languages, 27 countries, touring the world, teaching people about that.
I would like to thank our sponsor, Wink Beds. I actually learned about Wink Beds from Dr. Michael Breus. I asked him, what's the best bed available? He said, Wink Beds. I tried it out. I love it. I sleep really well on it. And I want you to know that Wink Beds is made in the USA and is the most awarded luxury mattress there is. And it has a 4.8 stars out of 5-star ratings out of 7,000 reviews. So people love it. And you can try it absolutely risk-free with their 120 night sleep guarantee. You can try a bed for 120 nights, which is a full 4 months. And if you don't love it, they're happy to return it. So you can make sure that this bed is right for you. So if you want to try a Wink bed risk-free and save $300, go to www.winkbeds, W-I-N-K, beds.com/love, and that will save you $300 and get you on your way to a good night's sleep.
You told me before we start here, how many books internationally did you sell?
So this, 125,000.
125,000 books. That's a lot of books. To hit the New York Times in the US, you just need 5 or 10,000 the first week. So
right.
you 10x that over a couple of years internationally. That's wonderful.
But to be fair, I didn't make the New York Times list because we didn't all happen in the first week. It took a little while for people to start taking the quiz and getting used to it. But to be honest with you, I love the fact that they do. And we've helped so many people. It's just kind of a cool, fun thing.
You know, I took the quiz no less than 5 times because I kept on wanting to be, I wanted to be a wolf. I wanted to be at night because I'd stay up late and I thought it was cool to be up at night. I said, he keeps on saying I'm a bear. This thing's wrong. I'm going to take it again. Maybe I'll tweak this. Maybe I'll say I do this. I started like tweaking my answers a little bit more, trying to favor the wolf, but it's always bear. I thought, can this be right? This is so strange. And then you said, look, if you're a bear, congratulations. That means life is easier. Life is designed.
Dude, I wish I was a bear.
And I thought, maybe I'm not going to fight this too much anymore. Maybe the quiz is right because no matter how I change my answers, it still comes out bear. So I'm going to go with this.
Yeah. And what's cool about it is once you learn what your partner is or your father or your mother or your children are, you can start to really understand. Now, here's one of the concepts that's important that I actually bring forward in my new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, which is a lot of people don't know what their chronotype is. So they're going to bed at the wrong time. Right. And that's really how our whole conversation started, which is what time should people be going to bed? It's variable based on your chronotype. A lot of people don't understand that. And so it becomes a very interesting play because once you put somebody into a category, then you can actually give them some guideposts and say, okay, look, genetically speaking, here's what we think is your range for sleep. Let's start you over there and let's figure it out and lock and load you in. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for hydration. Then we're going to lock and load you in there. So it's like once you learn this chronotype, it gives you so much insight into everything. By the way, anybody out there that's listening, I had one friend of mine, actually, Robert, you probably know him, Dave Asprey. He actually chronotyped his entire company, which was called Bulletproof. So he actually had every single employee take the quiz, and then on their name tags, they had to have their chronotype on there. And then they would schedule meetings based on chronotypes, right? Because here's the thing. If you're a wolf like me and somebody tells you that you've got an 8 a.m. meeting, what are you kidding me? I mean, I might physically show up, but my brain's certainly not going to be there, right? And so that was one of the things that we were trying to capture. In the new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, what we've been able to do is condense down a lot of that information. So number one, the chronotype stuff is amazing, and you'll get some of that in the new book as well. But what I've discovered is there are some very simple things that people are doing wrong with their sleep, but also in their hydration and in their breathing. And so a lot of people have been to me like, Michael, you wrote this really cool chronotype book. Like, why are you writing a book about things we already do? Like breathing and drinking and sleeping. Like, don't we already do those correctly? And that's kind of the big discovery is, if we tweak a few things, dude, we can make our bodies do so many better things than they already do. So that's what the book's about.
And what's so wonderful is your work is so foundational to human health. because if you don't sleep, you die. If you don't sleep, you're not going to form the memory. All-cause mortality goes up. I mean, whether you're going to, if you don't, I forget what the data is from the United Kingdom, but big sleep study, those who sleep less than, it was 5 or 6 hours, have increase of all-cause mortality compared to those who sleep 7 hours or more. And it's everything. It's not only diseases, but it's also get murdered, right? You're gonna make bad decisions in the wrong street corner at the wrong time, doing stupid stuff. So you don't fall off a ladder, curse out the wrong person, get in a car accident. So many problems happen when you don't sleep well. Just decision-making goes down. And then, sleep, drink, breathe. Most people aren't sleeping correctly. Most people aren't drinking either the right amount of water or at the right time in the right way, which you discussed, but also we're also drinking the wrong water. I mean, right now in the United States, we have glyphosate in our rainwater. If you're not drinking reverse osmosis or distilled water, you're likely poisoning yourself. And then breathing, Dr. Andrew Weil said, if you could choose one thing that affected our health the most, it would probably be the way that we breathe. We're not breathing deeply enough. And when you breathe deeply, you're actually nourishing your whole brain and body.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, at the end of the day, it's fascinating. I'll tell you some things I learned about the drinking that I never knew, right? So hydration, I've been a runner most of my life, and I've been a gym guy. And so I've always enjoyed working out. So I've always had to pay attention, right, to hydration, nutrition, just to make sure I had enough fuel, things like that. And here's what I noticed happen. I did this, and I don't do this anymore, but I noticed this at the gym. So I'll walk over to like the water bottle filling station, there's like a water fountain, whatever. And here's what somebody's invariably doing. They pull their water and they do this, and they just like pound like half their water bottle or their full water bottle. And then they bring it back and they get more, right? And so I am the pain in the ass that turns to people and say, hey, you should sip, not gulp. And here's the response that I get every single time. I'm just trying to get it in. And then my response is, it's not going in, it's going through. Okay? Let me explain. When you're dehydrated, your body is like a kitchen sponge. So when you wake up in the morning and you walk out to the kitchen and there's this kind of rectangle that's out there that's usually hard as a rock. I mean, you could beat nails with it type of thing. And if you put it under the faucet and you open the faucet up completely and all the water hits this hard sponge, it doesn't absorb it. It goes flying off of it, right? But if you only open up the handle a little bit and you start dripping the water on it, like a sip versus a gulp, right? Then the sponge starts to absorb, it forms. Now you have a useful tool, okay? So when you're working out, it's really good to be gently drinking like in between every set and things like that. You would be surprised how much easier and better it is. And you don't actually have to drink as much water when you're sipping versus gulping because it's actually getting absorbed.
That's something that we're really not taught. And certainly when I played sports in high school and college, we weren't taught how to drink. And we also weren't taught what things we should be drinking. Should we be adding electrolytes to our water? Should we drink reverse osmosis water? Yes.
So I did a whole section in Sleep, Drink, Breathe on what are called water accelerators, right? So these are powders that you can put into your water that is supposed to help with absorption of your water. So let me be clear. Most of them are salt. Okay. So just number one, look at the ingredient profile, because as an example, if you pull one out and you dump it in, it could be almost 1,000 milligrams of salt, which could be a lot for somebody, especially somebody who might have hypertension or heart disease, or might be a little bit on the older side. So these what we call hydration multipliers or hydration accelerators, we have to be careful. I like them, but here's how I like to utilize them. If I'm going to go on a hike, like a 3-hour hike, I'll use one then, right? Or if I'm going to do, like, if I'm doing my short run during the week, but I have my long run on Saturdays, I'll throw one in my water bottle on Saturdays, right? So when I know I'm going to have an extended version of what my normal activity level is, that's when a hydration multiplier could make a lot of sense for me. But I have to be cognizant that day in particular to not add salt to my food and to make sure that I don't eat things like, salty foods, because too much salt in the system really keeps the water in, and then you have a problem. I also want to double tap on a point that you made a second ago, which is the quality of the water is so important. In the book, we actually give the website where you can punch in your zip code and you can find out you can get a water table report of the water that is coming through your pipes. If you do it, don't let your jaw drop because you're going to see some crazy shit in your water. Okay. Literally shit in your water. Okay.
Do you remember the news reports that came out 5 or 10 years ago that talked about prescription drugs in our water?
Absolutely.
Because what happens is, as you know, people flush their prescription drugs or they pee them out, right?
Correct.
We excrete them. They end up in the toilet. Either pills go in there or the urine goes in there, and the water filtration system doesn't take it all out. It stays in the water. And so we're drinking, some woman's birth control pills.
Waters.
Probably not a really good idea. And some people have the wrong idea about this. I shared this with my friends. I was best man at my friend's wedding. I shared this with his parents, and she said, "Oh, I already take that drug, so I'm not worried about that." I said, "No, it doesn't matter that you already take some of the drugs that are in your water. That's not the idea. The idea is that there are some drugs in your water that you probably don't want, that you don't want the baby next door to have."
I would like to thank our sponsor, Microingredients. Microingredients has really high quality products. All of their products are third-party tested, which means an independent company has tested them for quality and safety. So you know you were getting the highest quality products. They have a great collagen. This great anti-aging benefit helps reduce skin wrinkles, great for your skin, hair, and nails. MCT oil is terrific in coffee, great dairy replacement. And this is also great for the brain. Can even help with weight loss. Their blueberry powder, their organic blueberry powder. I'd love to add this to my smoothies. And their newest supplement, their curcumin supplement, is fantastic. So a good curcumin supplement will have 1,000 milligrams a day of curcumin, and it will have black pepper. So this has black pepper, and this has 1,000 milligrams of curcumin, plus some other things in it, and MCT oil as well, which helps with absorption. Research shows I've been taking curcumin for at least 5 years. I'm going to take curcumin as long as I'm alive until the science changes, because this is so good for your brain. Curcumin helps reduce the accumulation of amyloid plaque in the brain. Curcumin improves memory in double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. Curcumin reduces inflammation. It slows down aging. Is one of the safest, most powerful supplements you can take. And so if you want to get this from Microingredients, go to Amazon and then use the coupon code RobertLove at checkout, and that'll get you a really nice discount on curcumin.
We really don't know what these micro doses of these medications, after they've actually been fully metabolized through somebody else's system, would do to your system. Because basically what's happening is they ingest the pill goes through their body, then it is excreted. And so it's not the same thing that comes out as went in, number one. So is that really good for people? I'm pretty sure it's not. That's why your body excreted it to begin with, right? And so it's not, I'm a big fan of, and I also liked what you said about the double osmosis and figuring that out. Now, I want to be fair. There's some people out there who might not be able to afford one of those types of water filtration systems. So in the book, we actually go through a lot of very affordable, like even a Brita pitcher with a filter in it is better than no filter at all. And quite honestly, I keep a Brita pitcher in my refrigerator, and I fill it every single morning, and I make sure I drain it once a day, drinking from it myself. And then I know I'm getting the amount of water that I'm looking for. I'm getting the quality of water I'm looking for. Also in the book, I go into the differences between distilled, spring, mineral, what is fluoride and why is it in the water and why should we get it out, and all of these other issues. So
I love that you do that. When I was in grad school at the University of Texas, I was a big crusader against getting fluoride out of the water. I met with city council, spoke with city council. We had world leading experts, Dr. Paul Connett, come in and talk about it.
Yeah.
And people laughed at us. And then I did work in policy school, and they're like, Robert's crazy. He's a conspiracy theorist with fluoride in the water. I said, look, just look at the science. Right? I'm right about this. The science shows this is not a good idea. It's dangerous to children's IQ. It reduces IQ in large studies in China where they look at population studies. It reduces IQ. It's bad for the pineal gland. It gets in the teeth and bones. Only half of it gets excreted. It stays in the body. This is a really darn big deal. Robert Kennedy addresses this, but and this has been going on since the 50s. Almost.
Yeah,
and then some
water. Fluoride started to be put in the water in like the late 40s, early 50s or so. And I think originally it was all for tooth decay. I think that was kind of the big thing was, we're going to help people's teeth. And, I just think it turned out to be not such a great idea. So again, I think people should drink filtered water. They should know the source of their water, right? So what is mineral water? It's actually got to have minerals in it. And by the way, I give a recipe in the book. You can create your own mineral water. It's actually
what is your recipe? Because I add a ton of minerals to so I get reverse osmosis water from Costco delivered, and then I add a bunch of minerals to it. And so what is your recipe? Can we do a recipe for a gallon?
So what I do for people is I give a general, and then they can add to it. So the general is probably what you already do, which is either distilled water, or I like Green Mountain mineral water because it's kind of a good base to start. And then I'll add Himalayan salt and some lemon zest to that. And that's usually a good place for me to start. I also personally, there's a group out of Arkansas, a couple of doctors called the Mortars, and they have these trace minerals. So that makes my mineral water really easy because I just put it in and we're good to go. So I like doing it that way. We've got a couple of different ways that you can do it in the book. And I think it's worthwhile. Like if you don't have a big budget, that's okay, right? Like don't feel like you can't drink good water because water is fundamental, right? Like you can go about 2 days without water and then it is bad. Like it is a bad scene very quickly and it is hard to recover from.
And so do you like adding magnesium or selenium or fulvic acid or potassium or any of these things to your distilled?
So one of the things that I try to be careful with is, and actually this is a good way to open up the discussion on supplementation anyway. So I have some interesting theories on supplementation. So my theory is very straightforward, which is I like to do blood work. So I want to see what's going on in your blood. And if you're deficient in something, then let's add it to your water or add it to your supplementation routine. For sleep, which is obviously my big area, I really look at 4 different things. Well, really 3 different things. I look at iron, I look at magnesium, and I look at vitamin D. Those are the 3 biggies. I look at melatonin, but melatonin is a much more difficult test to have done. It's a saliva test. You have to take 4 samples. You got to send it off. It's a pain in the ass. So it's hard to figure out melatonin as easily as you might want. But those 3 are good because here's my thought is I want to fix the deficiencies in this unit in my body first. Like I'm pretty sure that my body doesn't have a deficiency in ashwagandha. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a deficiency in valerian, right? It could have a deficiency in calcium or potassium or things like that, which is some of the things we're talking about. And so if I can get my profile, then you can actually make your mineral water to fit your profile of deficiencies. And so that would be my recommendation usually.
If you are having trouble sleeping, I have a great supplement I want you to know about. It's called Roar Lion's Mane. So lion's mane has many different benefits for the brain and for the body. Lion's mane improves memory. Lion's mane reduces stress, reduces anxiety. It helps slow down aging by lowering inflammation, and it helps with sleep. It helps you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and fall back to sleep. I learned about lion's mane about 5 years ago when I was having trouble sleeping. When I took it, after about a week, I noticed that I was sleeping better and I was able to fall back to sleep and I was having vivid dreams, which is really cool. And now I take lion's mane 5 to 6 nights a week. And I do this because it helps me fall back to sleep. So when I wake up, I'm no longer anxious when I wake up and I'm able to kind of lay still in bed and fall back to sleep. And I get vivid dreams, which I really like, and it improves my REM sleep. So if you'd like to try some of my Roar Lion's Mane risk-free, go to roarlionsmane.com or robertlove.net to learn more.
So we were just at a conference where sponsored by a new company called Function Health.
Yeah. Mark Hyman's company. I know Mark.
Dr. Mark Hyman, who's head of functional medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. I was just thinking recently, someone made a video kind of attacking Mark Hyman into science. I thought, you're attacking 15 or 16-time New York Times bestselling author and head of functional medicine at the Cleveland Clinic. Good luck. You better have something really, really important to say because people and the scientific community have agreed that what Mark Hyman says is pretty important. So you attacking him on some study that he's published, that's a strange thing to do. Anyway,
I'll tell you why people do that. Just as an aside, is there's a lot of people out there who are trying to make a career out of trying to poke holes in somebody else's career, and we see this happen a lot. And here's what I'll tell you: I know Mark personally. I know his science. He's a good doctor. He knows what he is doing. He is the last thing in the world he wants to do is hurt somebody, and so he is hyper attentional to the details, understanding side effects, understanding what's real and understanding what's not real. I mean, again, I know the guy personally, and I just would tell you that I think he's got high integrity. I think he's really, he is trying to create an entire new field of medicine called functional medicine, which, by the way, we should all be participating in because we go from our pediatrician to our internist to our gerontologist. And to be clear, we're dealing with Western medicine here. I mean, it's fine for acute care and disease, but there's no prevention, right? That's what functional medicine is all about. It's about prevention. It's about thinking forward. It's about probiotics, prebiotics, understanding what our body really requires. So, and also that's part of the reason I wrote the book is I feel like, this is a great place to start as well. So like, let's say, you listen to our podcast here, or you listen to Mark Hyman's podcast and you're like, shit, sounds like I need to get my ass in gear. What do I do? Where do I start? It's so confusing. There's just so much stuff out there. That's what Sleep, Drink, Breathe was designed to do, was to give you a start line, right? And so if you can work on your sleep, work on your hydration, and work on your breathing, everything else gets better, like almost automatically. It's kind of cool. And so that's really what we came to, is we're trying to give people kind of like get rid of the confusion and get you there.
Now, you have a great breathing pattern that you taught at this Weekend Health Summer that I was actually using late last night, this morning, to try to fall back to sleep. And so I'd love for you to share that breathing pattern that's both really relaxing, but also can help people fall back to sleep. And it's not only just relaxing, but also it's nourishing to the brain, because it's breathing deeply and getting lots of oxygen to our brain and to our body.
Absolutely. So this is going to take me about 3 minutes to describe this whole thing. So I'm just going to warn everybody now. Okay. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and let me rip into it. So here's the deal: is everybody's got a core body temperature, and that core body temperature rises until about 10:30 at night. And when it hits that peak at 10:30 at night, it begins to drop. That drop is actually a signal to your brain to release melatonin. Remember, melatonin is that key that starts the engine for sleep. So at the end of the day, you've got to have the core body temperature drop. Well, guess what? Your core body temperature keeps dropping, and then it hits the bottom, and it has to go north. It has to heat your body up. Otherwise, you go hypothermic and you die. Okay. Guess what? It happens between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning, usually. And every single human on earth wakes up between 1 and 3 in the morning when your core body temperature, because it automatically puts you into a lighter stage of sleep and oftentimes an awakening. Here's the difference: is 95% of people roll over and fall back to sleep. The rest of us don't. And that's the situation, right? And so that's really my area of specialty. That's really the area that I look to. And breathing helps tremendously during this particular situation. Let me explain. So there's 3 things that I have to have you do. So number 1, the first thing I have to people do, I tell them, is don't go pee. Yes, you heard it here. Do not go to the bathroom.
I've been hearing other people coach people, hey, if you just wake up, just go to the bathroom. I hear it so often, and I used to do that, and boy, it just totally destroyed my sleep. Almost any time I'd get up and use the bathroom, it was so much harder to fall asleep. It was an hour later before I could fall back to sleep. It was terrible.
And it wasn't even like you emptied your whole bladder. It wasn't like it was a big deal. Most people will tell me when they wake up in the middle of the night, they'll be like, well, maybe I have to go. I'll go try. That is a terrible idea. Let me explain why. In order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of 60 or below. Okay. When you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position and you walk across the room, guess what? You just jacked your heart rate straight up. So you don't want to do that if you don't have to. I want to be very, very clear to all of our listeners. If you've got to pee, please go pee. Okay. But if you don't really have to, don't get out of bed. Number 2 problem, looking at the clock. Now, I wish I could tell you that nobody was going to look at the clock if I tell them not to look at the clock, but everybody looks at the clock. And then they instantly do the mental math, and now they're pissed off, right? So they're like, it's 3:30 in the morning. I've got to get up at 6. Sleep, right? And they try to force themselves to sleep. Now, if you think about it just from an energy perspective, your energy is going in the wrong direction, right? You're trying to force yourself to sleep. That's requiring energy. You want to relax yourself to sleep, right? You don't want to add, because when you're adding energy, you're adding heart rate. And remember, we want a heart rate of 60 or below. So if you can, don't look at the clock. Now, to be fair, I'm not so stupid as to think nobody's going to look at the clock. Everybody's going to look at the clock. And if you have to actually go to the bathroom, you're going to have to get up and pee. Okay, Michael, I'm back in bed. Now, what do I do? This is where the breathing technique that you mentioned really comes into play. It's called 4-7-8 breathing. This was developed not by me, but by Dr. Andrew Weil, who is a Harvard-trained, one of the very first holistic, naturalistic doctors. Got a great clinic down in Arizona, I believe, Tucson. And this is a breathing technique, believe it or not, that he was teaching the Navy SEALs. So if you're a Navy SEAL and you're a sniper and you're shooting downrange, if your heart is beating too fast, it can actually change the trajectory of the bullet. So he had to teach them through breathing to lower their heart rate so they could fire in between heartbeats. Now, that's a long story, but the moral of the story is he taught everybody how to lower their heart rate to 60 or below, which is our magic number. Also, this technique requires you to count in your head, which means you cannot think, right? The second biggest problem, other than going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, is what my wife calls monkey mind, which is when you get back in bed and you start thinking about something like your kid or your career or the news, and you just spin it up, your heart rate is up, and now you're screwed, right? So 4-7-8 breathing is exactly what it sounds like. You slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. Let me explain the physiology and why it works. Most people are shallow breathers, meaning they don't use the entire lung. They don't get there. And in fact, what that requires is it makes your heart beat twice as fast because you're only using half of your lung. The lung was originally developed in order to be extended, and then that air goes all over the body. When you're only using half your lung, you literally have to breathe twice as much to do it. So when you slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you're adding some air onto some basically carbon dioxide that's been laying dormant in your lung for a little while. When you hold it for 7, you burn through whatever's left. And then when you expel for 8, you really dump all of that excess carbon dioxide. Now you're so out of breath because you've expelled so much air, you slowly breathe in for a count of 4. And now you've got a fully extended lung and your heart rate starts to go down. Within 10 cycles, your heart rate should be at around 60. Now, a couple of quick caveats here while you're trying this in the middle of the night. I lost count in the middle of the night. So you have to do 10 cycles of this or more in order to get to a state of 60. So here's what I do is I would lay my hands next to my body in like small, unclenched, like kind of clenched fists. And then what I would do is when I would get through one cycle, I'd do 4, 7, 8, I'd stick out a finger. Then I do 4, 7, 8 and stick out a second finger. And then 4, 7, 8 and stick out a third finger. And by the time I have all 10 fingers, I know I've gone through it because it's hard for me to count in my head 4, 7, 8, follow the breathing, and then count how many of those cycles I was doing. Does that make sense?
So this breathing technique is not only about relaxing, which is necessary for sleep, but it is also about lowering the heart rate down to 60 or below so that we can fall asleep.
And distracting our brain by counting so we can't think of stuff that stresses us out. So it's kind of like a double whammy, right? That's why I like it so much. Once you get through 10 to 12 cycles of that, what you can do is just kind of slowly go back into your normal breathing. Now, for some of you, that might not help. You might get more relaxed, but maybe you don't sleep. That's okay. Then you move into my second new way of counting sheep, which is counting backwards from 300 by threes. It is mathematically so complicated, you cannot think of anything else. And it is so damn boring. You're done, right? So once I get you there, now I have to distract you long enough while I keep you there. And then the natural sleep process can be able to take over. And this isn't the only breathing technique that we talk about in the book. We talk about breathing techniques for energy, for relaxation, all of the above.
So I'd love for you to lead us in this exercise. But first, have you ever watched Rick and Morty, the cartoon? Sure. Rick and Morty? Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you seen the one about the night person?
No.
Oh my gosh! If we're in the same place, we can watch it, or I can tell it to you. So there's this great episode where they program their unconscious sleeping person to do activities for them during the day. There's a counting sheep app, and so she's on her phone counting sheep on her phone. And I thought, this is the worst way to fall because you got the blue lights, right? And it's actually activating the mind. It's like, this is the absolute worst thing. It'd be better to watch Die Hard on your phone, but it would be due to this counting sheep app. It was hilarious. So Dr. Breus, can you walk us through that breathing pattern so we could experience it firsthand and embody it so that way that people can do it tonight when they go to bed?
Absolutely. So let's all do it together. Is everybody ready? So what I want you to do is sit in a chair, have both feet planted on the ground if you can. If you will, put your hands maybe down by your sides in small not tight, clenched fists, because we're going to be able to go through this and you'll understand how it works. I'm going to walk you through the first 5 cycles right now. Everybody ready? And with your eyes closed. And by the way, you're breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. Okay. So slowly breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I just did 1 cycle for everybody to kind of get a feel for it. Now, here's a caveat is some people find it hard to hold their breath for 7 seconds, and some people find it hard to expel a breath for 8 seconds. So what you can do, and we're going to try this one too, is we're going to do 4, 5, 6 breathing as a starter for you to get used to it. And I recommend that you try this during the daytime. So let's try that first, and then we'll show you how you graduate to 4, 7, 8. Everybody ready? Slowly breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5. Out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make sense? So actually, to let everybody know on 4, 7, 8 breathing, right before I go on stage, if you ever see me, I'm sitting off on the side of the stage. I'm doing 4, 7, 8 breathing, right? That's what I do before big anxiety moments or just big exciting moments. I always do this 4, 7, 8 breathing because it helps me become present and it resets me very, very quickly. So you can do it during the day or at night.
Excellent. So that's just a really powerful tool. I love that so much. And it's free and it reduces stress, which is so good for health, for sleep, for the brain, for reducing dementia, and also empowering us for difficult situations, whether it's stepping on stage or giving a presentation or having a difficult conversation with a loved one. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, I've been taking notes. I have all kinds of fun questions to ask you. I find it amazing, just amazing that we start school so early.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's almost like we had a bunch of monkeys make a decision by throwing darts at a board and choosing the earliest possible time.
Tell you how it works and why it works that way. So I've looked into this. So I actually got involved with a school start time company that was working towards lobbying to change school start times. So it all actually comes down to the bus schedule. So all parents couldn't bring their children to school at particular times. And so what happened was they would put all of their kids out. The bus comes by, you shove all kids on there of all ages, and they eventually make it to school that way. When it first started, what actually we had a round of busing that would take the young kids and then a later bus that would take the older kids because the older kids are
a good idea.
It's a much better system, right? And so it's really messed up because it's all based around busing these days. You can actually change it around. And there's some schools that have taken that into account, but it is a monumental task in order to do that. But if you look at the data, there was a great study that was done at the University of Minnesota where they changed school start times by 1 hour later. And every single child in their first period, didn't matter what their age was, went up a full letter grade when they came in an hour.
Oh my gosh. Imagine going from a B student to an A student, right? B student is kind of average, right? Going from a average to a high performer. Oh my goodness. I think it's in the book Nurture Shock. I don't know if you've read that one. They reported a bunch of interesting data. Their book reported that there was a town where they changed start times from 8 to 10 a.m. for students. And what they found was that SAT scores went up 100 points, which is surprising between a state school. Just between state school and Harvard, right? Or a really good school and a good school, like 100 substantial. And then number 2, car accidents were cut in half. Car accidents with teenagers were cut in half. So so safer drivers, higher SAT scores. And all they did was just allow them 2 hours of sleep in the morning. Amazing.
And what's interesting about that is, don't forget that teenagers are very young drivers. Like they don't have a lot of experience driving, right? They're 15, 16 years old. They've been driving for a year, for 2 years, right? And on top of that, we're having them drive to school while sleepy, right? So they're not very experienced. We're going to put them into a vehicle that could kill themselves or somebody else. And by the way, they're going to be really tired. And oh, by the way, they're probably taking their little brother or little sister with them, right?
And they're trying to look cool. I was definitely trying to look cool when I was driving.
Oh, of course.
I had to have my loud music, and I had to be sit in a certain posture and had to drive fast. Oh, by the way, my kids are not learning to drive at 16. They're learning like as if we were on a farm at 12, 13. If you're old enough to like sit behind a wheel, you're going to learn how to drive and get those skills before your hormones kick in and you start trying to low cool. Like, absolutely. They're learning that skill early. So what can parents do? I mean, is the only answer homeschool, or just, I mean, if I had a kid right now in high school, I would just write a note to every single parent and say, look, or every single teacher, look, my kid's coming in late. Do what you want. They're getting their sleep because that's the right thing to do. If your school is going to start early, that's just dumb. And so, my kid will do well in your town.
Right. What we try to do is we try to talk to schools about maybe like having physical education as the first thing in the morning versus a high level academic, like a math or something like that, where kids are going to get penalized for making small mistakes because they're tired. Or maybe a humanities course where there's more discussion going on than actual, having to take notes and things like that. I think there's some adaptations and it would be great. But at the end of the day, kids are adaptive. They will adapt to the system and they'll do okay. And we've all kind of gone through it, but it would be ideal if we could get them sleeping at their right time, specifically for their chronotypes. So just so that folks understand, if you're a teenager, you're a night owl, absolutely guaranteed. But you grow out of that into what would be considered your adult chronotype. And then go forward about 40 years, maybe hit your mid 50s, early 60s, and then your chronotype changes again. And so everybody actually goes through almost all of the chronotypes, which is kind of the interesting part.
You mentioned something interesting about hydration. And so have you been to Burning Man?
I've never been to Burning Man.
I know that. Cool.
I have a lot of friends who have gone, and I'm kind of thinking about putting it on my bucket list, but I'm not really sure. I'm kind of the guy who would want to like helicopter in, have a shower, have a place, go have a few experiences, and then helicopter out.
I tell you, I'm there for a full 3 weeks. I show up a week early to build. I'm there for the week of the burn, and then I stay late to clean up. I love it. I don't want to leave. I'm one of the last people who leaves. I just love it so much. It's been my greatest source of my evolution and transformation.
Oh, that's cool.
I've learned more about myself and about others and about,
as they say, the playa will provide.
Playa provides. And then you got people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos who come to Burning Man to get inspired for their transformational businesses. But Burning Man is a place where sleep is really hard.
Yeah,
because it's loud. It's loud at night. And there's stuff to do at night because you want to stay up. And then number two, it's hot, and so it's hard to sleep past 10 unless you have AC. So that's a problem. And then and then some people take mind altering substances which can affect sleep. And then the hydration is an issue at Burning Man.
Huge
too, because if you just drink water, especially during build when we're out in the basically a bunch of us go there and build. We don't get paid any money. We pay extra money to go there and build our camp out in the hot. I mean, I'm swinging a pickaxe into the ground. I'm thinking, man, I paid for this. I enjoy this pickaxe. This is great fun. But we're sweating up a storm, and so the hydration is such an issue there too. And these fundamental things are really challenging out there. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on this little selfish request in difficult situations like this, where it's hot and where it's distracting at night, where it's loud. And then we want to stay up all night too. And I'm able to do Burning Man for 3 weeks because I prioritize my sleep. I say, look, I'm going to go to bed at 5 a.m. before the sunrise, and I'm going to sleep until 11. I'm going to get a good 6 hours, and that's enough to last me during the week of the burn. And if I do that, and I drink enough water, I can make it through there and be rather rational after 7 days of being out there in the middle of the desert.
So what we see with extreme conditions, right, is it's all about prep, right? It's all about your preparation and your knowledge base, right? And so like the areas that you're talking about for me, for Burning Man, that I would have a big interest in is, so like number one of the things that we could do is we could use melatonin and we could shift your clock so that you would not be tired until 6 a.m. And then you would be extremely tired at 6 a.m. like a shift worker would be. And then we would use eye mask, a special eye mask that would be very inclusive. We would have special Bose and another company called Oslo. I have no relationship with them, but they have special sleep buds that you can put in your ears and wear while you sleep that will drown out noise. Bose headphones had made them originally, and now a new company picked them up called OSLO, I believe. You might have to look them up. And then from a heat perspective, here's what I have my patients do who get warm but don't have air conditioning, is I have them get a water bottle and freeze it, and then they put it into a tube sock, and then they put one on either hip when they're in bed. And so the tube sock is so that as the frozen bottle melts the condensation on the side, you just don't want to have a wet spot in your bed. But it's like having your own little mini air conditioning, and it will actually help you sleep longer because it helps keep your body cooler longer. And so I have people do that. It's like a little mini air conditioning.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh, that'll be so great for Burning Man. Now, we're talking about sleep. I know mattresses are a big question, so I'd love to get your expert opinion on what would be good for a regular person to look into a mattress. Do they want these temperature changing mattresses? This is something new in my experience in the last 5-10 years. Mattresses that change temperature and monitor temperature. What kind of stiffness do we want? What do we need? Because I, for one, for some reason, I spend a third of my life on my mattress, but I don't want to spend the amount of time I do money on my mattress as I do on my car, even though I spend more on that. You could certainly say that affects my life more than my car. And so I think if people are mispricing mattresses, the value of a mattress in their mind, because it's so important.
Yeah, well, I would argue it's probably the most important piece of furniture that you're going to buy, right? You spend more time on it than you do your couch or your lazy boy or, even your car. So I tell people that it's worth putting a few dollars into a bed. Now, I want to be honest with you. On my website, thesleepdoctor.com, we have over 150 mattress reviews. So what we did was we kind of took all the hard work out for people and we brought them in and we actually did lab tests on them. So we did the spring test. There's like a ton of different tests that we do so that we can understand like what are the physical properties of this unit and how do they match with a human companion. And so we've created
like those sleep commercials where they're dropping bowling balls and they're spilling glasses of wine, or they have the pillows and they're dropping a cannonball on the pillow fluff, and the egg isn't getting crushed. I mean, these commercials for sleep, for the pillows and mattresses, they're just great.
They're great. They're a lot of fun. We don't do the bowling ball drop. We have things that are a little bit more on the science side of things, but we do have an understanding of like tensile strength and springs and how those work. And so the good news is that there are different mattresses for different types of people and different types of sleepers. So as an example, if you're a larger person, then you're going to have a particular mattress that's going to have specialized steel springs, because if let's say you're 300 pounds or 350 pounds, normal mattress isn't going to be supportive for you and it's going to run out in terms of its support fairly quickly. So you might need a specialized steel framed mattress. If, for example, if you're older, let's say you're 55 or 60, you may want to have increased edge support on your mattress, because a lot of people who are my age, when we get up in the morning, we sit on the edge of our bed for a few minutes to just kind of wake up and kind of get the day going. If you don't have edge support, you fall right off and now you're on the floor, right? Looking at low back pain, there are certain mattresses that are better for low back pain than others. Looking at sleep position, that, for example, if you're a stomach sleeper, there are certain beds I would never want you to sleep on. But if you were a back sleeper, those beds might be just fine.
On position, I've heard that it's best to be in the fetal position for your back, that's actually and it's best for breathing. What is your thought on sleeping position? Should people try to be in a specific position for optimal sleep?
So here's what I would tell you is the best position in terms of overall is actually on your back. Because when you displace weight across the skeletal frame, you can do it evenly when you're lying on your back, right? When you're on your side, all of your weight is being pushed to one side or to the other side, and that's causing the capillaries to become crushed, what we call capillary crush. And then you get the tingly feeling, and then it makes you rotate to the other side, and then you're kind of doing the back and forth thing most of the night. Now, the fetal position is interesting because what it actually does is when people are kind of bringing themselves into this fetal position, what they're doing is they're actually opening up their spine. So many people don't know this, but while you're walking around during the day, the constant pounding is actually squeezing the discs in between your vertebrae. And when you lie in the fetal position with your back arched, you're actually opening up the discs and they become rehydrated. So that's really one of the best aspects of being a side sleeper. I will tell you, though, that you want to sleep more on your left side than on your right side. I try to remember it as right is wrong. Because if you sleep on your right side, you actually will crush the opening to your stomach, and that can cause that sphincter to open, and that's where acid can come into your stomach, and then you get gastroesophageal reflux, things like that. Also, for women who are pregnant, they don't want to sleep on that side because it limits food to the fetus, things of that nature. So it's worth reading an article. I've got a lot of articles about sleep position and kind of what are the best ones. And to be fair, if you have low back pain, you should never sleep on your stomach.
So back generally is good for just displacing the weight. And then if you have back pain, sleeping on your left side in the fetal position is good.
Probably.
Now, I've heard about some things about elevating the bed. I've heard both, and I actually don't sleep with a pillow because I've trained myself to not sleep with a pillow because I read that it's better to have a certain angle. And so one, I heard it's good to have the top of the bed higher, so your head is higher. That is for good for some reason. I've also heard if you have your feet higher, actually more blood drains to your head and kind of it increases the glymphatic system, which we haven't talked about yet. The glymphatic system being a
so there's no data that I've seen that suggests that raising your feet increases glymphatic system, but raising your feet does, especially for women because their pelvises are tilted slightly in order to be able to give birth. It does when they raise their feet up, it actually retilts their pelvis and it pulls all the strain off their lower back. So for women who've got low back pain, I like them to put a pillow underneath their knees while they're lying on their back, which helps rotate that pelvis upwards and makes for a much more comfortable situation. By raising the head of the bed, what you're basically doing is kind of pulling gravity out of the equation. There's pros and there's cons to raising the head of the bed. You might have seen they have adjustable bases now where they can raise the head, raise the foot, do all these kind of fun things. I think those are good for people who are back sleepers. But for example, if you're a side sleeper and your head of your bed is raised, like it's not going to go well, like you're going to be crunched, like it's not going to feel good. So I tell people all the time that you need to sleep in a position that you can fall asleep in pain-free and wake up from pain-free. If you can't do that, you need to look at changing your sleep position into something where you can.
That's a really good marker there. So I interrupted you about mattresses. So in your experience with the data, there's no cognitive enhancing benefit to either raising the head or raising the feet of the bed or raising the head or feet of the mattress.
I just haven't seen any data. I don't know if it's there or not. I've never looked it up and I haven't seen any data that would suggest that. When you're looking at something called the glymphatic system, which is kind of the waste management system of the brain. So it's kind of comes in and it pulls out all the proteins, something called beta amyloid and tau, which are very important for avoiding things like Alzheimer's disease. Stage 3-4 sleep becomes super duper important because that's where the majority of the glymphatic system is working. What there is data to suggest is that if somebody does have the head of their bed raised, I want to say I think there was one study that showed that it increases stage 3-4 sleep in some people, but I'm not positive on that one. So I'm gonna have to go back and look it up. But that would make intuitive sense. So if you had to raise the head of your bed, which helped improve stage 3-4 sleep, which then helped improve the glymphatic system, then I would say, okay, raising the head of the bed helps with the glymphatic system.
Can we talk a little bit about sleep, memory, and Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah.
And so in my experience, I'm a neuroscientist. And I specialize in helping people prevent Alzheimer's disease. And so sleep is one of the biggest factors that a lot of people don't address. Just one night of bad sleep, your memory's impaired. If chronic bad sleep, you got chronic brain fog, and now that's a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And now you're in trouble.
Right.
And so can you talk about the role of sleep in memory formation, memory consolidation, and why this is so important for having a healthy brain as we age?
Absolutely. So number one, you may know more about this area a little bit than I do. So feel free to correct me if I've got my anatomy or any of my theories wrong. But, when we're looking at memory consolidation, it's really about REM sleep. So there is some memory consolidation that occurs in stage 3 and stage 4, which is basically where your brain is kind of sorting through all the data and deciding what to keep and what not to keep. And then during REM sleep, it takes the data that it's decided to keep and it basically moves it from your short-term memory to your long-term memory, right? And so there's an encoding process that occurs. So basically, you have data that's coming in through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, and through your mouth. And your brain has got to do something with all this information for retrieval later on. So it creates an organizational substructure like a filing cabinet in your head. And so it knows where to kind of put that information. And that's where the memory consolidation comes in and that formation can come in. And so that way you can go back and retrieve it. Now, to be fair, dreaming is really what we think a lot of this process is. This consolidation of memory seems to create this crazy movie in your brain that is pretty interesting at times. Sometimes you remember it and sometimes you don't. I really also think of this process as what I call emotional metabolism. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on during the day, and emotionally it has to get somewhere. It has to be processed. It has to be turned into memorial functions. And so that occurs during REM sleep. And so that also is what I believe dreaming and dreams is this memory consolidation and then the emotional metabolism of what the emotions were within the memory is what's going on. And it's usually projected into the back of your forehead like a dream.
And so why is sleep deprivation, chronic sleep deprivation, or chronic trouble sleeping, can you help you understand why this is such a major risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one, I think I would probably go back to, well, I think there's a few. So number one, when you're sleep deprived, you're not getting either the quantity or the quality of the sleep that you're looking for. And when we talk about sleep quality, we're talking about stages 3 and 4, and we're talking about REM sleep. Those are the biggies that we really want to kind of see happen. And so I go back to the glymphatic system again, because I feel like that is probably the biggest influencer that sleep has on Alzheimer's. And once again, just for folks' edification, the glymphatic system is like a garbage truck that comes into your brain at night and pulls something called beta amyloid and tau out of there to allow for more of it to be formed. Now, you might be wondering, well, why do I have beta amyloid and tau in my brain to begin with? Well, that happens when you think and when you make decisions and things like that. This is a what we call, it's not the best term, but they call it brain dirt, right? So it's the aftermath of what happens when you're thinking a lot. These proteins begin to form. And what's interesting is if the proteins don't get cleared out, they like to wrap around the nerves, and that's called Alzheimer's disease. And that's what we want to try to avoid. So by pulling the proteins out, we have a much greater likelihood. Now, I want to add one caveat to this explanation, which a lot of listeners are not going to enjoy, but they need to understand it is the truth, is that alcohol basically destroys stage 3-4 sleep, which is where this protein elimination occurs so you can avoid Alzheimer's. So for folks who are listening, drinking alcohol, especially before bed, is absolutely positively a terrible idea, even though it makes you feel sleepy. And even though a lot of people use alcohol as their sleep aid, believe it or not, number one sleep aid in the world, it's horrible for your sleep.
Now, how much alcohol and how close? So could we do a glass of wine at dinner? By the way, I don't drink, and I love what you're saying. I wish people would go alcohol free. First of all, there's so many negatives to alcohol. It's actually quite expensive, and being sober feels so much better for my brain and for my body, because now I can work after dinner. I like to work after dinner. Drinking wine at dinner just kill my productivity. It impair my sleep. I'm a less nice person when I don't sleep. So my quality of life, my quality of work has skyrocketed since letting go of alcohol, basically completely. And so how much alcohol?
So I have a method. So what I tell people is it's all about the amount and how close to lights out. So the more you have and the closer to lights out, the worse it is. So it takes the average human 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. Here's an interesting little fact. That number changes to 4 hours when you're asleep. Okay. So when you go to bed drunk, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people wake up and still feel buzzed after 6 or 7 hours, because their entire metabolic process is slowing down. But let's go back. So what I tell people to do is, let's say that your bedtime is 11 o'clock. Okay. So, and you're sitting down to have dinner at, let's say, 6:30. So 6:30, you can have your first glass of wine. Now have a glass of water after that. You want to intersperse water in between your wine. Now it's about, let's say, 6:45, 7 o'clock. The meal is served. Have your second glass of wine. Have a second glass of water. Now you stop. You wait 3 hours, so it should be about 7:30. So 3 hours from that is 10:30. Your normal bedtime is 11. You're good to go. You're not going to have a massive problem with being able to sleep while drunk. Okay. But this is really only if you got to have alcohol. And I will tell you something, Robert, that is the biggest negotiating factor that I have with my patients on a regular basis is, I'll do anything you want, Dr. Breus. I'll wake up at this time. I'll go to bed at this time, but don't take away my booze. right, is one of the things that I hear on a regular basis. And so I have to educate them. And so what I tell them is I say, look, let's run the experiment of not drinking for 2 weeks and let's see if it improves the quality of your sleep. And then you can go back to drinking whenever you want. I just want to run the experiment to understand what's going on. So I approach it very scientifically from a data perspective. One of two things happens. Either they're able to do it and then they say, oh, I didn't realize how much alcohol affected me. I'm going to really change my ways. Or they can't do it. And then they have another problem. They have an alcohol problem. Then we start to fix that.
It's certainly, that's the major sticking point that you have with patients and clients. When I work with patients and clients, so we have a medical clinic here in Florida where we're reversing Alzheimer's disease, and part of it's through lifestyle, part of it's through an FDA-approved drug for compassionate use for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease. Our biggest challenge is food. Our biggest challenge is helping people change their diet. People are very resistant to someone telling them, you can't have this. So we try to say, look, you can eat whatever you want, but if you don't want Alzheimer's disease, you really don't want to eat this. And so I highly suggest you stop eating this because this food's really expensive to your brain, to your health, and to your quality of life. I can't tell you what to do. I can.
And is that usually like over-processed, like ultra-processed foods, or are there certain foods in particular?
It can be ultra-processed foods. Usually people know those are bad for them, but it's oftentimes the things that people think are good for them that aren't. So for example, taking away dairy like cheese or gluten or a bunch of carbs or things like that. People think, well, I think this food is healthy for me. Well, actually, it's not. Not the way that you're eating it. It's actually spiked. But it's so fascinating to me. And then the science on food is so interesting where, carbs spike blood triglycerides. Carbs spike fat in the blood, whereas fat actually lowers triglycerides. So fish oil will lower your blood triglycerides, which is, it's a fat, whereas carbs will spike your blood triglycerides. And so people don't understand that they have high blood triglycerides because they're eating too much carbs. And so just almost any tinkering of the diet, people are generally pretty resistant to, because I'm dealing with older adults. People are 65 plus. They've eaten what they've wanted to for most of their lives. Now they learn that they can't. People really resist being told what to do, and they really don't like it when you take away their food, especially when our food is so chemically engineered to be addictive, to be very compelling palatability. It's very hard to help people steer away from that harmful food.
Yeah, and I also find one other area is caffeine. Is that, especially with my older crowd, they're so used to drinking coffee all day. It's just like, yeah, I drink coffee. Oh, how much do you have? Well, I don't know. I've never even counted. I put on a pot in the morning and I put on another one in the afternoon. I'm like, oh my God.
Part after dinner. I mean, sipping a cafe latte in the evening. But you're a fan of Seinfeld, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Remember when Kramer goes in to see the psychiatrist and he's like Elaine's shrink, and he's pretending to be her boyfriend. And he says, would you like something? The psychiatrist said, would you like something to drink? Yes, I'll have a decaf cappuccino. And he's like, I don't think we have that drink. He said, well, that's very peculiar. Why do you find this strange? Well, it's a very popular drink. It's like, this is an office, sir.
Right.
I understand.
Exactly.
So I love caffeine. And then I also like it with my morning cold plunge. I know you're a fan of cold plunge. You got a picture of you and your son in a cold plunge here. So the cold plunge, I love the dopamine spike from that. And then when I add in coffee, I am just focused for the first 4 hours. I don't even need food. I feel amazing with my morning cold plunge for 3 minutes, and then my cup or two of organic coffee with some MCT oil. I am rock and roll. Now I cut it off at 2. Choose my cutoff.
So that's what we need to talk about, is what is the cutoff for caffeine. And so when we're talking about, people who are, let's say, in their 40s or 50s, then I think 2 p.m. is probably a good idea, because that caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. And so if you stop at 2, at least half of it is out of your system by 10, which is when most people are kind of going to bed. However, if you're 65 plus, here's the problem, is your metabolism doesn't function like it did when you were younger. And so the half-life is actually longer, not shorter, for older people. And so they need to actually be stopping caffeine earlier, like more like noon, if at all possible. And again, it's just about running the experiment, right? And that's how I pose it to people, is I say, look, I'm more than happy to let you drink as much caffeine as you want, but can we just run the experiment where you stop caffeine by noon every day? You can have 2-3 cups in the morning if that's really what you want to do, and go for it. Me personally, I drink a half a cup of coffee every single day, right before I either run or spin, or do my cardio. I have a half a cup of black coffee. I usually have it after I've drank at least 20 ounces of water and taken my omegas, my vitamin D, my creatine, and I'm ready to go.
Now, you like hydrate before you caffeinate. I love that phrase.
You've got to hydrate before you caffeinate because what people don't realize is sleep in of itself is a dehydrative event, right? You lose almost a full liter of water just from the humidity in your breath. That's not even like, sweat and oils and things like that coming from your skin. So
does that hold true if we mouth tape? So I've been mouth taping for the last 2 years. I love it. My thought is I'm keeping a lot of the moisture in my body by not exhaling through my mouth.
So the greatest likelihood is yes. But what I will also tell you is people need to be careful with mouth tape, and let me explain why. So for a lot of people out there, the reason they're mouth taping is because they're waking up with a dry mouth or something along those lines. What's really going on is they have a lot of nasal congestion. 94% of people will close their mouth once they're asleep if there's no nasal congestion. That's what the data says. And so a lot of people are out there mouth taping. Here's my biggest issue. If you have undiagnosed sleep apnea, you are screwed, because basically what you're doing is when you tape your mouth, you're completely stopping the symptomatology and the disease is just getting worse without you knowing it. So it can be highly problematic. And so the only caution that I have is if you're going to use mouth tape, there's two different things you need to know. One, get tested for sleep apnea before you do it. And number two, there's a special kind of tape. It's a micropore tape by 3M, and it should go vertically. You should never go horizontal. It can be problematic for all kinds of reasons. And please don't use something like Scotch tape or duct tape or anything like, or any masking tape. Terrible idea. You will rip the hair. You will rip the skin right off your lips, and it'll be quite painful.
And so you mentioned monitoring sleep devices. So I have an Oura ring, and I like looking at my sleep data. And so I noticed you and I aren't doing conventional on the pointer finger. I don't like the look of a ring here. I like it on the middle finger, maybe on. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm married, so I can't have it on this finger. So the middle finger for the ring. So this has been really helpful for me just to look at my heart rate, to monitor my activity during the day, and then see, well, how did I sleep? I think I slept like this, but what does the data show? And I know the data is not perfect. Is this good enough to test for sleep apnea? Will this tell someone if they have sleep?
It's not.
No.
So here's what I can tell you about trackers kind of in general. So number one, I wear an Oura. I like Oura. I would say that it's probably the most accurate, but this is really the best of the worst. Okay. Like, to be clear, nobody does a good job of this. Oura and Fitbit have done head-to-head studies, and those two appear to be comparable. I personally do not like the Whoop strap. Whoop strap is great if you monitor activity. Oura is great if you monitor sleep. I feel like there's a very big distinction there, because Oura is a sleep company and Whoop is an activity company. They just happen to measure what each other is doing. Also, don't forget is you never want to look at your pinpoint data with Oura or any of the trackers. Like, I can't count the number of people, dude, that walk up to me and say, what does this say? I've got 14 minutes of deep sleep, Michael. What does this mean? To be clear, it doesn't mean a damn thing. What it means is that your tracker is being consistently inaccurate, right? If it says you're getting 14 minutes of deep sleep every night, we all know that you're not getting 14 minutes of deep sleep. But for some reason, people are so freaking stupid. They come up to me and they're like, what's going on? This is a problem. I'm like,
so how much deep sleep and how much REM sleep should we shoot for a healthy adult?
That's not the right question. The right question is, how much sleep should I get so that I wake up and I feel refreshed? So people should not be digging into the numbers, because number one, they don't have the knowledge base to understand what they are. And number two, they're not getting accurate data. Okay. There isn't any, and especially with this demographic, let me tell you about something that not one tracker has done, and it really pisses me off, is when you're in the sleep laboratory, like if you came into one of our sleep laboratories when I was practicing, what we would do is if you are over age 55, we actually have to change the scoring criteria of your waveforms, because your brain waves are not as high in amplitude. So when I was first doing this 25 years ago, all of a sudden we noticed, hey, everybody who's age 55 doesn't have any deep sleep anymore. And then what we realized is they actually have deep sleep, but it's harder to identify because the waveforms are so different for older people in deep sleep. There's not a tracker in the freaking universe that accommodates for that. I can assure you. And I certainly haven't seen one, and I've asked a bunch of them. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, they don't even know. So when you're talking about people who are 55 plus and they're using trackers, number one, don't look at your data. Only look at it one time a week, okay? And look for trends. If it says consistently that you're getting 14 minutes of deep sleep, you're not. You're fine. If it says 14 minutes one night, 407 the next, and 362 the next, okay, then we want to see what's going on those days. So we're really looking for the delta or the differentiation from the trend is what we're really trying to look for when we're tracking sleep. And I want to be also clear about something is there's some people who should not track their sleep because they get too into the numbers and then they start freaking out about it. And then they're waking up, they're saying, and they're looking at their Aura score in the morning and they're saying, I feel like I slept great, but I got a 47. That doesn't do anybody any good.
And so how do we want to use this to track trends? Trends, basically a time that we initiate sleep and the time that we get out of bed and try to stay consistent in those times. That's what it's really helpful for. And I like the heart rate too. The heart rate before bed's informative to me, saying, okay, maybe I'd wait another 20 minutes to calm the heart down.
I agree. I like the heart rate before bed. And then Aura also has a nice feature, which is called HRV or heart rate variability. And that's also another measure. That's something that you have to measure at night because you're looking for the variation between your highest heart rate and your lowest heart rate throughout the day. That's what heart rate variability means. And so I like that aspect for Aura. And to be fair, I think they're getting better. I think they're trying. I know everybody's working on the science. There was actually a different ring company that has just come out with an FDA cleared ring that actually does full nighttime polysomnography, that you can actually diagnose sleep apnea, narcolepsy, restless leg syndrome with this ring. And it literally just came out like 3 weeks ago. So I would say that the technology is starting to get better and better. So what I guess the main message is hold tight because the next round of trackers is probably going to be a lot better.
If you or someone you love has Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, I want you to know there is hope. Alzheimer's is preventable and it is even reversible. In fact, we are reversing Alzheimer's in my medical clinic here in Florida. My partner and medical director is Dr. Josh Hellman, a medical doctor trained at Harvard who specializes in preventing and reversing Alzheimer's disease. And we are reversing Alzheimer's in our patients. If you'd like to learn more about working with us to both prevent Alzheimer's and even reverse Alzheimer's and reverse memory loss associated with other forms of dementia, we would love to hear from you and send you some free information so you can learn what we are doing and see if it's a fit for you to come down and work with us in our clinic. We also work with other clinics around the country to help patients both prevent Alzheimer's as well as to reverse Alzheimer's and reverse memory loss associated with dementia. So if you'd like to learn more, go to brainpowerclinics.com. Go to brainpowerclinics.com and then enter your information. We will send you some free information, and then we hope to work with you, if we can be helpful to you, to help you prevent and reverse Alzheimer's disease.
Fantastic. So the book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, available on Amazon right now. He also has another great book that tells you exactly the time that you want to go to sleep called The Power of When. I read that one years ago. I love that book. So either one of these books is a great place to start if you want to improve your sleeping. And if you want to improve your breathing, go with this one. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Breus.
Thank you. And wishing everybody out there sweet dreams.